triggers feeling shame. They can all hit you in a moment and you wouldn't even know it. Hi, I'm Laura Hanson Brexa, and I think people have fascinating stories to share. And welcome to Know It, Live It conversations with people who live passion and principle on purpose. Later on this week's Know It, Live It.
I have the joy of being able to work with a lot of beautiful clients from around the world. And I see the influence that they have on their employees and on their partners and on their kids and on their friends. And I can see it growing and changing and getting better. I know, well, it's easy to look at the world and think there's just so much fear, there's so much anger, there's so much hatred, there's so much violence. But as we focus on that, it shuts us down. It shuts us down, and that fear can really be like crippling. And so I am really grateful that I have the opportunity to see the other side of that, that there's so much light, that there's so much beauty, that there's so many beautiful people in the world doing so many beautiful things. And then I get to be a small little part of that in my world.
Hello, and we are here with Crystal Haitsma, and I'm so glad to have her come on the show. I met her purely through her website because I think parenting is great. I have 4 grown children, and there were many things I wished I knew back then. And I was fascinated with what she had to say, and I'm so glad that she's here to talk to us. Welcome to Know It, Live It, Crystal.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited too.
One of the things that you talk about that is fascinating to me is feelings. I'm Gen X. We didn't talk about feelings. I know it's a
Uh-huh.
criticism we hear, but we did our best. We did our best. I want to know, with your training in psychology and the way you coach parents, does that situation come up in discussion, or how do you think a parent can navigate that?
Yeah, I would say a lot of people will say like big feelings, like our kids have really big feelings, even our teens have big feelings, our adult children's have big feelings. And sometimes that can lead to a lot of conflict in our relationships and tension that can last for a long time. I think it's getting more and more common now for people to have more estranged relationships with their parents or with their kids or whatever, because they're like, this is too much tension. So I'll back up and say the first 4 or 5 years of my coaching was primarily parenting, and especially helping people through things like this, exactly like with the big feelings. How do we handle them within ourselves, within our kids? And I recognized a few kind of common threads below the surface. And so now what I typically tend to coach people on is not just parenting alone, but it's more shame and the triggers that kind of pop up within us. And so I'll kind of mention what a trigger is. A trigger is a strong feeling within us that's not necessarily matching the situation. So my child might, start freaking out like children do, and I might feel some really big feelings about that maybe don't necessarily match the situation, just like my child is probably dealing with, right? And so what I noticed is like the thing that really blocks us from being able to respond well are these activations within, and they're always connected in shame. And shame is a sense of inadequacy or lack of worth in some way underneath the surface. It's a little bit more in the subconscious space, so we're not necessarily knowing that that's why we're triggered, but that's how the connection is there. So let's go back to in the moment. A younger child example might be they don't want to go to bed, and you're putting them to bed, and you put them back to bed 17 times, and then they still keep coming out, and eventually you just lose it. So I think a traditional way of looking at that would be like, okay, well, they just need to go to bed, and this is like kind of their problem, and they just need to listen. And so we would probably yell, or we would shame, or we would dismiss, or we would just lock the door or whatever. Kind of the new, I don't know if it's new, but a more compassionate way of viewing that is, why is this child that's ignored me 17 times activating me so much inside emotionally? Because there's probably been times in the past where things similar to this happened and you didn't feel that activation. So despite what it looks like on the outside, that it's like an actual, child not listening problem, it's actually an opportunity for us to kind of look inward and say, what's happening inside my own self? What are my own feelings that are being brought up? And even I do have a feelings wheel on my website, but even if you don't name the feeling, the name of the feeling doesn't even matter as much as the sensation. So maybe I'm just feeling there's a lot of feelings coming up. I don't even know what they are, but like my face is feeling hot. my palms are feeling sweaty. Like it just feels like maybe it feels like anger inside. And so we're going to take that moment to pause and we're going to step away before we choose to respond. And we're going to assess and kind of deal with our own internal stuff first before we go back and choose to respond. And the reason we're going to do this is because our thoughts create our feelings fuel our actions. And so all of our actions and inactions, what we choose to not do also are being fueled by, anger or frustration in the moment. And that's always going to lend later to us regretting it, to us feeling bad about how we responded. It's not effective for our kids themselves. It's not effective for our relationship. And as people who believe that relationship matters most, that's what I believe relationship is the most important thing. That's what I'm going to try and preserve. And so it's not that I'm just not going to parent anymore, but I'm really going to step away and kind of attune to what's happening within me first before I choose to respond. And the same goes for adult kids. The same goes for teen kids, right? Your kid calls and says something to you and you feel that trigger inside. You're going to either shut down and withdraw. You're going to go to people pleasing where you try to just make everything better all of the time, even though you're still feeling really bad on the inside. Or you're going to get really defensive and blamey. You might do all three of those things. And that's how we know that shame is present. Those are the three shame shields, the ways that shame shows up when it's under the surface. And so my approach is more of a let's figure out what's happening inward, because when we're feeling calm and compassionate and empathetic, we don't even need to assess those things scientifically. We don't have to pause and be like, wait, what are they feeling? What am I feeling? How do I respond? It actually comes very naturally. Right.
Mhm.
If a friend calls and tells you I had a really bad day, you don't have to like pause and think, when do I stop talking and listen? When do I tell them, oh, that feels really hard? Like we're not questioning and analyzing, right? But we do this so much in parenting. We're like, wait, what exactly should I say? Like, what exactly should I do? And that's just because we're blocked from that kind of knowing that comes innately um, when we have those big emotions. So I would say, kind of the process is like to pause, to turn inward, and then the actions will naturally flow from a new feeling.
Hmm, that's really interesting. Yes. I wonder if some of the reasons why parents or caregivers or people in a relationship, whatever their relationship may be, but specifically talking about parenting, are not paying attention to their bodies and reactions or triggers. It's because they may have been trained to not pay attention to themselves, to be givers,
Absolutely.
to look at the other person. And so they think they're doing the right thing by not being conscious of themselves. And so that's a bit of a conflict because they are going to have to learn a new skill because not thinking about themselves is the good way to be.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's absolutely possible to change. I know it's possible for that to change, but it's hard. And I think a lot of times I coach people all the way from I've coached kids as young as I don't know, probably 14 all the way up to the oldest client I ever coached was 80. So the whole spectrum of ages, and we actually have a lot more in common than we don't have in common. And I think one of those commonalities we tend to see, I think probably especially as women and especially as women in mid-age and beyond, is that tendency to only care for others and to kind of lose ourself in the place of others, especially as mothers. I just recently worked with a lady who's moving towards retirement, and she was like, I don't know what to do now. Like, my kids are gone, and like, I've just never been me. I've never asked, what do I want to do? Like, who am I? And I think that's something that we all feel is familiar and similar, whether it's in the parenting realm or not. We have to kind of figure out what are these patterns and ways of being that are kind of maladaptive, that are separating me from who I am, from my body, from my feelings, from my desires, from my passion, from me really, and who am I actually, and how can I find that person again? And it feels separate from parenting, but it's not at all. Like, that is how we actually come back and parent well. Some people call it reparenting, because we have to reparent our own inner self in order to do it differently. But I don't think it matters if you're a parent or not. I don't think it matters what stage of parenting you're in. We're all called to kind of do this work of finding who we are, what we enjoy. I don't know, a spiritual awakening, if you will. Like, what are my thoughts? What are my feelings? What's happening within me on a deeper level? And we can ignore that and, scroll our phone and overwork and overdrink and overeat and all the things we kind of do to avoid the discomfort that's within, or we can face it. We're really good at the avoiding, the world gives us lots of opportunities and fun ways to avoid. They're like, "Here, just work some more. Just go help this other person." Um, and so I think a lot of our work in life is really to be facing the discomfort that comes with being a human and the feelings that come inside. So feelings are definitely my jam. They're my main focus in coaching nowadays.
I like that discomfort within. So that good book title. And we can be avoiding it even with good things. So it doesn't feel like we're avoiding it.
Mm.
You knew when you were young that you wanted to work in the field of emotional and mental health, and that was your
Mhm.
purpose. And I
Yep.
can tell by what you do that you live it with passion. But I want to know what goes on behind the scenes. How do you live it with passion? Because there's a lot you do
Mhm.
that no one on your webpage or that sit in one of your classes
Mhm.
know about. So tell me what that goes in the background.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you brought up, what I wanted to do when I was younger. So I didn't necessarily grow up in a home that had a lot of good mental and emotional wellness. It wasn't that led me to it. As I think it is with most people, it's usually the opposite. And I was in high school and I was in an options class that was psychology that I just randomly decided to take. And I was sitting there with the textbook open and I just had this overwhelming feeling like this is your future. And I just knew. I didn't even know what it was. I actually didn't know what a psychologist even was at that point as I was reading through this book. I'd never been to a therapist. I didn't even know my family had ever been. Like, it was not mental health was not something that we talked about at all. And so it felt pretty like random, like kind of like a side. Like my family was like, "Wait, what are you going into? Like, what are you interested in?" I didn't even know. I just knew I was interested in why people do what they do. So, I would say behind the scenes is that I was very interested in self help and psychology, and I read a lot of books and I learned a lot of things. But my mental and emotional health and my relationships were not good for a long, long, long time. For most of my parenting journey, I would say the first 10 to 12 years of my parenting journey, I yelled a lot. I was very disconnected from myself. I watched a lot of TV. I scrolled a lot of social media. I tried to be out of the house a lot because I felt like it was easier to parent my kids outside than inside. I would say I was pretty activated and triggered by a lot of things, way more than just parenting, like people online, my friends in conversation, my sisters. Like there were so many things. And I was very unawake to that. And so I feel like it was kind of miraculous and serendipitous that I ended up the way that I did. But I went through kind of a parenting journey where I really hit rock bottom and had to figure it out. And in the figuring it out, I realized how much of my behavior was impacting my kids' behavior. And it was actually kind of all in a moment. I was talking to a therapist. I only hired her one time. She came over one time, but that's exactly what I needed. There were some things that she said that really helped me see, like, wait, there's a role I have in this, and like, what is that role? And then to see such huge changes in my kids as I changed my response to them and see their behavior change was massive. So for a long time, I feel like I was kind of just asleep to knowing that I even had thoughts and feelings and that they mattered and that they were impacting people around me and myself. And that seems kind of silly to say now, but I really wasn't aware of any of that. And so, circa 2017, that started changing. 2019, I'm feeling pretty good about life. And I decided to sign up for the life coach school, which was my first coaching certification. And still not super aware of all of these things. And it was like whiplash. I was like, wait, what? What are my thoughts? And I have so many thoughts. And but through that, realized that they didn't really talk a lot about emotions. And so emotions and the nervous system and shame and trauma is all kind of the avenue that I went down. So I would say behind the scenes is that the work that you see on the outside comes from the work that's happening on the inside that's very real to me. And the very real work to me is like my own triggers, my own activations, my own tense relationships, my own suffering that pops up. And it only shows up on the outside once I've done the work on the inside. So anything that I've ever taught or spoken about has come from first me learning it for me. And not even for the purpose of like now then I'll go share with somebody, but like I need to figure this out. Like this is a problem for me. And so the last few years it's been business, it's been masculine and feminine energy, which is not the same as male and female, but structure versus flow. And anyways, there's been wealth. It's been something that has been on my mind the last few years. So I'm always learning and growing and changing, but whatever whatever it looks like on the outside comes from a lot of deep learning and sitting and feeling and changing growth on the inside. And every day I have a practice for that. I do meditation, I do journaling, I read, I do several things that kind of really keep me aware of what's happening in my internal world that has then changed my external world. I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, it did. I'm just sitting in the thought of what you're saying. Just sitting in the thought of you working through and you learning. And as you let it sit with you and as you practice things that you've learned, and then as you learn more on your own and practice, and then you share it with others, and then their lives are blessed. And I like what you've said throughout this idea that you become something, not just check a box.
Mhm.
And I think that runs into my next question is what is success? I
Mm,
want to know what success is to you because you're talking about becoming, not
mhm.
doing. So tell me about
Yeah.
what is success to you?
Yeah, I think in the world we often see success as something external, right? So maybe I get a promotion, maybe I have a really good job, maybe I get famous on social media, maybe I make a lot of money, maybe I get a Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know any of the like things that we think on the outside that are just hugely successful. And that's usually kind of what we measure success to be, right? Even in the younger ages, it's like grades are really important or athletics, scholarships, how well you do in university, the job you get out of university. Um, so I think traditionally speaking, success has been a very external thing. And what's really fascinating is that we can have all the success in the world and not feel it inside. And that's kind of the dichotomy that I started to notice is that you can be a very successful person externally and then be internally thinking like, "Why don't I feel successful? Like, what I should feel this way." And sometimes in positive psychology, they'll talk about like the goalpost changing, like the closer you get to the goal kind of shifts. But I think it's even more than that. I actually think that shame shares this idea. The metaphor that comes to me is like a marathon. It's like we're running this marathon, and don't worry, like once you reach the end of the marathon, then you can feel good. Like you've done enough, you are enough, you can finally rest, you can finally just feel good about yourself and your life. So just keep running this marathon. But shame always lies. Shame never shares truth with us, at least not the whole truth. And so we just keep running the race and we just keep running faster and we keep passing all these checkpoints and never feeling any better on the inside, or at least briefly, right? I met a lady who had lost 70 pounds and she was like, I finally made it, I feel good, whatever. And the more kind of deeply we got into what was happening in her really deep internal world, she actually felt just as bad about herself as she
Oh,
did before then. So even things like weight loss, right? We think like when I get there, then I will feel. And we get there and maybe we feel it for a fleeting moment. Maybe we never actually feel it. It doesn't stay. Anything that's been driven by shame is like we're planting the shame seed and then it grows that. It can't grow a different plant than what we planted. And so this dichotomy of success is like success isn't something external, so how can I feel satisfaction? How can I feel wealth? How can I feel success on the inside? And the feeling of having that now is actually what drives success. Like true success will happen. And then I'll feel good the whole time too, which is a benefit of that. But so when I think of success, I think like relationships. I want to have like really close, intimate, connected relationships with the people I love. I think of like adventure and experiences, like having fun and doing fun things, because that's a huge part of what I do. I love to travel. I love to read. I love to learn. I think of like just my love of learning, like that's success. I think there's lots of external success that I have achieved, but I think it came first from the feeling within. And we can feel success no matter where we are in our journey. And I do think that actually propels that external success. So I think I just think of it a little bit different now. It's not something outside, it's something within.
I think what you're saying is so vital to parents because you cannot control what your children become.
Hmm.
Um, you can't. They make their own choices. No matter how perfect you set up, whatever systems, however, whatever you do, you cannot choose what they will become. I'm going to be successful if my children become lawyers, become chess champions, spelling bee champions. You're a homeschooler, you know what I'm thinking.
Mhm.
That's an awful trip to be on. And so when I'm putting
Mhm.
together what you're saying is if you feel like you're successful, feel successful by world standards, I think you're going to feel a lot more peace. Do I understand you?
Yeah, totally. And I don't think this is something we can do consciously. I don't think we can be like, oh, yeah, it's totally fine. I feel good. Like, I think there's some deeper work there. But I think one thing you said that was really important, I can't remember the name of it, but there's an actual psychological term for what we do as parents. And I think especially as moms, where our worth is tied up with our kids. So if our kid does something well, then we can feel good about it, right? It's completely based on their behavior. It's like I have this cord inside me connected to a cord within them. So even as much as like, they had throw a tantrum at Costco on the floor in the grocery store, which has totally happened to me before, or my teenager is, failing at school or all of their friends, bully them or whatever. It can feel so hard for me because I'm so interconnected with what is happening with them and their behavior because their behavior means something about me. And I'm not saying we're doing this at a conscious level. Everything I've said pretty much for the whole podcast I want to offer is like, this isn't conscious level work. This is deeper work. Subconsciously, I can believe I'm a good mom. No matter what my kids do, I'm totally there. Like, I believe you. But on the inside, those little quiet feelings that are like, wait, is that actually true? I find that for me, what I call the subconscious, unconscious space, those beliefs and feelings are often exactly the opposite of what I believe consciously. And I think that's more what drives our behavior than our conscious mind. I know that that is what is more that what drives our behavior. So, most of what is happening in our nervous system happens from the subconscious and unconscious space, like potentially up to 90 to 95% is subconscious and unconscious and not so much our consciousness. So, anyways, all that to say, this work is deeper work. So even if you're thinking, you're listening and you're like, no, no, I feel really good about my parenting and my kids, like pause for a minute and really think about that. How do you feel? How do you feel about your kids? How do you feel when they have behavior that you don't necessarily agree with and make choices that are opposite of your value system? How does that feel within you? And how do you feel about yourself? And I think part of the reason why we don't understand that this is happening at a deeper level is that we don't give our ourselves space for that. We don't pause enough to recognize that there's something deeper happening within us than just our consciousness because we have to be still for that. We have to be quiet in order to hear that. We can't just be busy all the time, right? I used to have like the radio on back in the day all of the time. Every time I went in the car, like the radio was on. Or when I was on a walk, I was like listening to something. Um, we give ourselves very little time and space to just be. And so it can be really easy to think like, nope, life is, I don't agree with anything you're saying on this podcast. Actually, my life is lovely. Just take 10 minutes even to just pause and do nothing, not have any stimulation at all around you and just stay. And see then what are your thoughts and feelings then? Because that can be really important. For me, when I started this work, it really was opposite of what I thought.
So are there bad feelings?
No, no. We were at a park one time and my 9-year-old was there and was talking to a friend of mine and he was like, but there are bad feelings, right? And I was like, let's ask her because she hears me say this all the time. And I was like, hey, her name's Navy. I was like, hey, Navy, is there any bad feelings? And she was like, no. And he's like, what about anger? And she's like, no, feelings are just messages. And he's like, well, what's anger's message? And she's like, probably that something needs to change. And so then he kind of quizzes her. He says, 4 or 5 different emotions, and she, sure enough, has a response for every emotion. But um, feelings really are messages. They're messages to us. They're telling us something, which is why if we don't create the time and space to listen, we're not getting the message. And there is no bad feeling. It might feel uncomfortable inside. It might not feel like amazing inside. But often when we're repressing those feelings, we're actually feeling more of it. So if we're someone that's like, "No, no, no, I just need to feel happy all the time," when people like kind of give that kind of a, "No, I'm just a happy person all of the time," there probably is a lot under the surface that is getting pushed down. And if we don't listen to those feelings, they'll pop up in other ways, right? They'll pop up in anxiety, they'll pop up in panic attacks, they'll pop up in chronic issues in our physical body, they'll pop up in not being able to sleep at night. We you can't shove them down. we we try, but there is no actual way they will surface in some way.
And maybe um, in very dangerous ways as we as it shows up in the most vulnerable people, which are your children,
Mhm.
because they don't fight back because they're little.
Yeah, I think that, I think it's tricky. Parenting is tricky. It brings up a lot of our wounds, and we don't know how to deal with that. And like you said, this isn't something that came from before us. Like my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents, shame was the way that we parented. We didn't even speak about it. Like we didn't even know that that's what we were doing. And if you look at the etymology of the root word of shame at the bottom, you can just Google it, but at the bottom it says like usage, word usage over time. And so it was really popular in the 1700s. It starts decreasing and decreasing by the 1900s. Nobody's really talking about it anymore, and then in the 2010s it like resurfaces again. And I attribute that like all to Brene Brown. I think that her viral TED talk on shame and vulnerability started opening up a conversation where people started talking about shame again. And I would say that like that is our primary modality of behavior change up until now. Whether it's weight loss, whether it's schooling, whether it's in religion, whether it's at home, we can shame somebody without saying anything. It's not words that have to shame people. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. And so I think up until now, that is something we have not been talking about, but that is absolutely the way that we have been creating behavioral change, if you will, in the people around us. And so I think as we start to kind of look inward and see how that feels for us as adults, to be like, oh, that actually doesn't feel so good. Maybe we can do things in a different way. And that hopefully we do in the future. But I see it everywhere. I joined a musical theater group this summer, and I could see how people interacted with each other in that way. I talked to people who have corporate jobs and the way that they respond to each other and their peers and their employers. And um, I think it's so much more common than we think. I think we don't really understand how big of a deal it really is and how it's kind of weaseled its way into our relationships, whether it's our relationship with money, our body, or other people.
So give me an example of what that would look like using shame.
Using shame. So I'll give you a parenting example. The parenting example I usually use when I first kind of uncovered for my own self, like I said, the work was always within, and then I realized what was happening outside. But I noticed that this one kid of mine, in my perspective, never listened to me. Like no matter what I said, they were never listening. And so I remember this one time I was trying to tell them to do something. I don't remember what it was. And I mentioned it over and over and over again, and they didn't listen. And I could feel the trigger well up inside. And by this time, I wasn't a yeller anymore. I had done enough work around that. But I was like sitting in my office, and I was like, why did that bother me so much? Like I knew to pause, I knew to withdraw and not respond. And as I'm sitting there, I was like, man, like this is just really, it feels so big. And it wasn't a big thing on the outside, but it felt really big on the inside. So I just started to question, like, what's really happening in my mind? And I was like, well, he should listen. Like, he's a kid and I'm an adult, and like, he should listen. Like, that's his role. And I started thinking about it more. And I'm like, well, if he doesn't listen, which clearly he's not right now, why does that bother me so much? Like, what is really behind that? And my brain immediately answered, like, well, good kids listen. Good kids have good parents. Good parenting means kids that listen and immediately obey. And, like, that didn't feel like something I consciously believed at all. I don't believe that at all. But that was still in me from my parents, from my grandparents, from my great-grandparents, from how I was raised, like, that was so deeply in me, and that's where the trigger came from, right? It's like, wait, if I'm not a good parent because my child is behaving this way, and my whole role in life is to be a parent, and, like, at that time, I was a parenting coach. So I was like feeling even more shame, like, wait, I'm parenting, telling people how to parent, and here my kid isn't listening, and no, no, no. And consciously, again, I did not agreeing with any of these things. But under the surface, like that is what came up. And that is shame, right? Inadequacy in that area of parenting. What does that mean about me and my worth and my value and who I am? Shame is like not enoughness in some area. And it's more than just like consciously, like, oh, I should have done something differently, but like you feel it. And that's a small example. Um, but I would offer that anytime that you feel that activation on the inside, a trigger on the inside, ask yourself, like, what really bothers me underneath this and then just pause, don't do anything else but just listen and just let it kind of layer down. Like the top layer might be like anger, frustration, whatever, fear. But underneath, there'll be some other layers. And once you get to those other layers, you'll see the threads of inadequacy underneath that it's really hitting. And so that's the work I focus on now. So I've not updated my website in a long time, but I do talk about parenting to people still within the realm of shame. But my specific area of focus now is that in all the areas of our life and how it's kind of interrupting how we want to show up as a human being.
I'm just thinking about what you're saying. I'm taking that quiet moment. So, how is what you're talking about with feeling different than the gentle parenting trend that's happening right now? Is it different or is it the same? It doesn't sound like the same thing to me,
Okay, so
but
I would say it's not different, but only because there's so much miscommunication about what gentle parenting is.
I don't understand what gentle parenting is then, because it
Yeah.
sounds okay. Tell me.
Yes. I would say the typical mentality around parenting is one or the other. Control being like force, which again can be like shame or whatever. That's also rewards and punishments. Behaviorism, like how can we change this kid's behavior? Force and control. On the other side of that, we have apathy. And apathy is like, I guess you just do whatever you want because like there's nothing I can do here. Oftentimes people look at that spectrum and they think, oh, gentle parenting then must be apathy. And it could be from the actual people that are explaining it in that way. It could be from the word itself, gentle, because sometimes we actually need firmness. But I would say it's not even on that spectrum. Like that is not even what we're working with. What we're working with is connection, it's relationship, it's connection being what matters most. It's secure attachment, it's safety and security and my child feeling that from me. They actually do need firmness to feel that from me. And firmness not being the firmness that we have traditionally seen. Firmness is actually much more quiet. It's much more gentle. It's not loud. Um, and it's steadier. Um, so there's not a lot of, I would say, good examples of how we see it. So then we're like, oh, what are they doing? And they don't really know what they're doing. And even the people that I would coach, they'd be like, I have no idea how to do this gentle parenting thing without just doing nothing. And that's not gentle parenting either. So I would say it's connection, it's relationship, it's safety and security. But more than all of that, it's what is happening within me because I cannot create I'm going to create a false sense of safety and of security if I don't have that within myself first. I'm going to like read all these books and try to incorporate them and not and wonder why it's not working. This was me for so many years. I knew about this work when my kids were quite little. My oldest is 19 now. So he was probably between 2 and 4 when I started first reading these books that talk more about attachment and whatnot, and could not implement it for years and years and years. I
Mhm.
just could not figure it out. And I would be so frustrated. I would go to courses and programs and I'm like, what is happening? I paused. I looked at him in the eye. I was calm in my demeanor. But on the inside, so much was happening. On the inside, I was actually feeling a lot of feelings. And guess what? Our kids are thermostats. They know our feelings. So they're actually way more in tune with what we're saying internally than what we're saying externally.
They are.
Yeah.
They
So
are.
that I would say no, it's not different than gentle parenting, but do we get a little mixed up around what gentle parenting is? And are there maybe some people speaking about it that are speaking about it in a way that makes it look like it's on the apathy side? Because it's not even on that spectrum. There's no apathy, there's no control on the spectrum that we're working with. And it's much more conscious of what's happening within me. Am I feeling safety and security in my own system? How can I cultivate that within myself? And then cultivate that within them because modern research shows us that the nervous system is directly correlated to the mother's nervous system. And so a child who hasn't developed that yet and doesn't know how is getting that from our nervous system. But if our nervous system comes from years and years and years of pushing down our emotions, being told that our emotions are too big, like go to your room or spanking or yelling or whatever, we don't have much of a calm, regulated nervous system to work with. And I don't mean regulation doesn't mean calm all the time. It means up and down and able to move back to center. And so, if we don't have much to work with there, then how are we supposed to help them with their nervous system? So it has to start within us. And I'll also put a caveat on that, that like it's never too late to change this. Like I've helped adult people with their adult children change the relationship. So if you're listening to this and you're like, shoot, well, my kid's a teenager and like their nervous system's already, developed or whatever. I don't think that I think that everything is malleable, that we can change at any point and that it can impact and influence the people around us. So I don't think it's ever too late. Yeah, I just finished reading a book by Thich Nhat Hanh called You Are Here, and he's like a famous Zen Buddhist monk, and I love all of his work. And he talks about how we first have to address ourselves. We have to address our own suffering. We have to address what is happening within us. And then he said, secondly, then we can truly be there for the person that's in front of us. We can't unless we address ourselves first, but then we can truly be there for the person that's in front of us. So I think that as like, my spouse, my kids, my friends, my immediate family. And then thirdly, then we can be there for the community and the world. So I think sometimes we jump all the way to like, let's fix the community in the world because we see problems there without fixing ourselves. Or let me fix my husband because I don't like the way that he's, relating here or whatever, or my kids, but we haven't yet fixed ourselves. I think there's like a unique and special and very important order to that. I think it needs to be in that order. I think it is addressing what's happening within first. And then, secondly, that I can come back to the person that's right in front of me now in this moment. Because once I've addressed myself with compassion, compassion being the antidote to shame, once I've addressed myself with compassion, then I am able to hold compassion for the person in front of me. And then I can go to beyond that to the world, to my community at large, to the community, the global community, and respond differently.
And what do you think that would be like?
Yesterday, I don't remember what state she lives in. I think maybe Maine. And there was a really famous monk that came and is doing like a peace walk. And so she went to meet at this peace walk, and they did some Buddhist chants and meditation or whatever. And he spoke, and she just said, "We were all reminded that power is quiet, that power is not angry, that power is not loud, and that is what peace is." That is what it feels like inside me. And I resonated with her words so much. And he was able to remind that entire crowd of hundreds and hundreds of people what power really is, that it's quiet, that it's peaceful, that it's not power over others. And his energy and influence in the world, I know, is great. I just watched a documentary with the Dalai Lama, and I felt that same way about that documentary and about the work that he's doing. So we get to do that work in the world once we've done our own internal work and the work with the people around us. And I imagine that that work works even if I'm walking on the side of the road and I smile at somebody, or I just pass by, or I interact with the cashier, even though I'm busy or I'm rushed, and I respond in a different way than what they're used to. Um, I think that's the real work. We were traveling around the world as a family for like 8 months. We did this crazy world travel for a school year. And I noticed that how I had responded to my family was very different now, but how I interacted with customer service people had not changed very much. That if they got something quote unquote wrong, right, when we're at the airport and they're like, actually, you don't have a flight booked, or actually, you can't bring that luggage. And I'm like, no, I have my 4 kids and we have all our luggage and I need it here. And anyways, they're telling us it can't work. That I would immediately go into the like, nope, this needs to change, and like control and force mode. And a few instances happened like that. And I was like, ooh, I am not at the community and world space yet. Like there is still something even within this interaction with this one person right now that is triggering me. And so that became my work over those 8 months. I decided like, if I can get to be the compassionate, loving human that I want to be, even in these situations where it truly was like somebody else's error. And I think our go-to is to be really unkind to workers like that. um, that kind of became my science experiment internally of like, how can I shift this? So I think everything in the world could change if we all did this work. And I think that as we do the work, we influence people around us to do it too.
So, what makes you happy in your purpose? Crystal is our last question. Last
I
thought.
think everything. I think I wake up every day and I'm grateful that I get to be reminded of this work as I do this work with my clients. I have the joy of being able to work with a lot of beautiful clients from around the world, and I see the influence that they have on their employees and on their partners and on their kids and on their friends. And I can see it growing and changing and getting better. I know, well, it's easy to look at the world and think there's just so much fear, there's so much anger, there's so much hatred, there's so much violence. But as we focus on that, it shuts us down. shuts us down, and that fear can really be like crippling. And so I am really grateful that I have the opportunity to see the other side of that, that there's so much light, that there's so much beauty, that there's so many beautiful people in the world doing so many beautiful things, and then I get to be a small little part of that in my world. So my joy and my purpose come from doing this work internally so I can help the people in my world externally and hopefully be a really positive force for change in the world at large.
Well, thank you very much, Crystal, for joining us on Know It and Love It. How can
Thank
people
you.
reach you?
So you can find me on Instagram at its.crystal.noelle. Noelle is Noelle and Crystal Crystal. I have lots of different workshops that I do. I just did a free goals workshop that you can get the recording of. That's kind of like an anti-goals workshop, as you can imagine after listening to this episode. And also one on wealth on January 20th, where we're going to talk about wealth in every realm of your life and also wealth in a very different way, and how to increase wealth in a way that actually feels good to you in the world. So there's lots of things I have going on all the time. And my podcast is called The Art of Shame-Free Living. So you can go find me there too.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
What is the best parenting advice you've ever gotten? Please comment below. Remember, feelings are warnings, so stop and listen. And that's coming from someone of the earliest Gen Xers. See, we can learn, we can grow. So pay attention to your feelings. And take a peek at knowitlive.blog for some pretty good scoops stuff. I'm Laura Hanson-Brexa, and this is Know It, Live It. Conversations with people who live passions and principles on purpose. See you next week.